Alright everyone, it's time for Vermont Issues episode 81, Density Increase for South Burlington. I can remember, this is something that personally, I witnessed. They started developing one of the main highways that sort of goes around the airport area in South Burlington. We're talking many years ago. I think it would have almost been 20 years at this point. I can remember when they started building a lot of condominiums, sort of the mid-density part of South Burlington. I don't know how much they actually developed, but I can remember, early on there, before they began that, when you were coming down the highway. They had this, sculpture of two whale tails at the time, and that was sort of almost a tourist attraction in and of itself. And you looked off, and there was just this fairly vast open area that hadn't been turned into anything. It was just open land. It was grass. It's got to be some hundreds of acres, I would imagine. They developed it over time into suburbs, and pretty soon it came right up against the highway. There's only a little green strip there now and some fences, and then there are homes off on that side. Now what they've been doing now is talking about redeveloping the area and turning it into actual apartment complexes, something higher density. This is something that parts of Vermont, unfortunately for some of the scenery, at some point, we're going to have no choice but to do this, to compact sort of these actual city communities more inwards, make the downtowns bigger and a bit more dense, try to work on infrastructure, because it's simply more efficient. When more people are in that area, maintaining the roads alone becomes a lot easier. That's one of the biggest issues we've got in this state. I wasn't happy early on, the view early, we're talking when I'm 8 or 9 years old. It's wide open. It almost looked, for Vermont standards, it was relatively flat. So it's it's a huge open field. It's kind of pretty, actually. Now, when they developed it, I was oh, now there's just a bunch of houses and stuff. It doesn't look as good. But it would probably make more sense to have actual apartments there. South Burlington, I know, is doing this. Burlington's done some downtown redevelopment. I think it's that one little mall area in the downtown. They're redeveloping that. Here in Rutland, we have occasional calls for establishing a civilian mall of sorts, like a Church Street a la Burlington style thing. I'm not sure it'd work here, though. Rutland has some key disadvantages to a place like Burlington. Oh yeah, 1/6 the actual metro population. I think that might become a problem, or 1/3 the actual city population. Yeah, a little bit difficult. Maybe if Rutland town and city merged, but I don't see that happening, because here in Rutland town, nobody would want to merge with the city. Comparatively, our roads are well maintained, and things are generally better in the town area, which has a far lower population. But if you look at a map, Rutland City and town used to be together, and I believe Proctor was also part of it, and West Rutland. Now you've got basically the donut hole, which is Rutland City, with the donut around it, which is Rutland town. It's just a big ring. It's hilarious to look at the map, actually, of our metro area. Burlington is a little bit easier to deal with. South Burlington has been consistently above average when it comes to okaying forms of development. Downtown Burlington, they're oh, we don't know if we want to change things too much. If it's UVM, yeah, they can do whatever they want. Anyone else, you have to get all sorts of legalese involved. South Burlington's oh, no, we want some more apartments, and they'll probably put in some businesses or something. The most efficient design I can think of for the kind of small town feel that we have in some of these communities is really apartments above, apartments and offices, so to speak. And then on the ground level, by a sidewalk, essentially, then you have some businesses that can then rent or own those areas. And a business owner, of course, in such a situation can live right above their business. For them, it's extremely efficient. In terms of, you have a more compact downtown also. Some people in those downtowns may not even really need to own a car, per se, if it's near enough transportation. They could just take a taxi if they're flying somewhere. They don't need to drive. Now, what do we know about the Burlington Airport? If you're parking your car there for any significant length of time, you're paying through the nose. That would be another thing. I think they're talking about expanding the airport as well, if I remember correctly. But I'm not really sure. I do know that they had a squabble over the new fighter jets. They had some F-16s there, and I think they've got F-22s now, or was it F-35s, or one of these new planes. They're oh, it's so much more noisy than it used to be. I can attest to that too. Back when they were flying sorties years and years ago, It was loud, but no, not that much louder than a standard commercial airliner. Now it rattles the windows. I'm surprised that people don't have like shattered windows at times if they're living too close to the airport. So South Burlington's kind of a far out place. A lot of residential development and then some urban sprawl, basically. Because the business side of it's totally subjugated to the Burlington downtown, to sort of the UVM era, groovy area, catering to the groovy UV kids, the roughly, I believe, 12,000 or so people that are being educated there. So it's a large portion of your commercial base. But there are some businesses there that do well. The Leonardo's closest to UVM has excellent pizza, by the way. If you're ever in Burlington, you need to go to Leonardo's. They also have some of the weird, like, hippie-trippy stuff, like, oh, here's the vegan pizza, and here's the Asian-style pizza. I just get a standard pizza with a shit ton of mushrooms put on it. Just my own preference. Best topping there. It's really fresh and awesome. At least it was when I was there years ago. But yeah, South Burlington's going to increase its density yet again. They developed it the first time. Now they're like, yeah, you know, kind of inefficient maybe. The condominium thing isn't really that popular in a lot of parts of Vermont. Quechee loves them. The Quechee area is overrun with condominiums, but that's, you know, way over on the other side of Vermont down here, far away from Burlington. Burlington's got a flatter land to work with. It's also got more arable land to work with in its surrounding areas. So you've got some of the farms and the smaller little communities around it that are quite scenic. And remember, 5 minutes outside of Burlington, you can be in the middle of the woods. That's one of the advantages to the kind of communities that we have here in Vermont. A lot of nature. But Burlington really, the general region, not just Burlington, Winooski, South Burlington, Shelburne, that general region, Essex, need to stay as developed as possible because it's really the only major metropolitan area that we have in the entire state. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with it, I suppose. They should definitely have more whale tails along, I think, the side of the road also. That's about all. Peace out.